He didn't ask my name first, he asked about the necklace like it belonged to him. And that was the moment I realized I had made a mistake coming here. The rain hadn't stopped since I stepped off the bus, my shoes soaked through within seconds as I stood in front of the iron gates, gripping the strap of my bag, like it could anchor me in place. This wasn't my life, this wasn't supposed to be my story. I was just here to replace my mother, just for a few weeks, just until she got better. At least that's what I told myself when I signed the papers, when I ignored the way her hands trembled as she packed my things, when she whispered, "Don't ask questions, and don't let him see that necklace." I should have listened, I should have turned around when the gates opened without anyone touching them, when two men in black suits stepped forward and looked at me like they already knew everything about me. Instead, I walked in the driveway, stretched longer than a football field, lined with lights that cut through the rain like blades, and at the end of it stood the house. No, not a house, something colder, something too quiet for a place that big. My heart wouldn't slow down as the front doors opened before I even reached them, like the house itself was watching me, waiting. A woman led me inside. Without a word, her heels clicking against marble floors that reflected every movement, every hesitation, like I couldn't hide anything here this way, she said finally, her voice flat, like she'd said it 1,000 times before. I nodded, even though she wasn't looking at me anymore, just walking faster like I needed to keep up or be left behind. We passed rooms I couldn't even fully process, chandeliers, paintings, furniture that probably cost more than everything I owned combined. But none of it felt warm, none of it felt lived in, it felt controlled, like every detail existed for a reason I didn't understand yet. "This is your schedule, your duties, your boundaries," she said, handing me a thin folder without stopping. "Don't go beyond them, don't speak unless spoken to, don't wander after 10 p.m. I swallowed hard and nodded again, even though my throat felt tight. "What about him?" I asked before I could stop myself. She paused just for a second, then turned slightly enough for me to see the edge of her expression. "You'll know when you meet him." That should have been enough warning, but it wasn't. I kept walking until she stopped outside a set of double doors, darker than the rest, heavier. "Somehow you'll start here," she said, and pushed them open. I stepped inside, and the air changed instantly, cooler, quieter, like the rest of the world had been shut out. The room was dim, lit only by a single lamp, casting long shadows across polished wood. And that's when I saw him. He was standing near the window, looking out into the storm like it didn't touch him, like nothing could. Tall, still, dressed in a perfectly tailored black suit. Even at this hour, his presence filling the room. Without him saying a word, I froze. I didn't mean to, I just couldn't move. His head turned slowly, like he'd felt me before he saw me. And when his eyes met mine, everything in me went still. Not fear, not exactly, something sharper. Something that made it hard to breathe. "You're not Maria?" he said, his voice low, controlled, like every word had been measured. "No, sir." I managed my voice, barely steady. "I'm her daughter, Emily Carter." Silence stretched between us, thick and heavy, as he studied me like I was a puzzle he hadn't expected. His gaze moved from my face to my hands to the bag I still held too tightly, and then it stopped on my neck. My breath caught as his eyes narrowed just slightly, like something had clicked into place. Something dangerous. He took one step closer, then another, until the distance between us disappeared before I even realized he'd moved. His hand came up, not rough, not gentle, just certain, as his fingers closed around my wrist, stopping me from stepping back. "Where did you get that?" he asked. And suddenly the room felt smaller, like the walls were closing, and I tried to answer, but the words wouldn't come, because the way he was looking at me wasn't curiosity, it was recognition. And when his voice dropped lower, colder, he said something that made my entire world shift. "She was supposed to be dead." And in that moment, I understood. I hadn't just walked into a job, I had walked into someone else's unfinished past. I did not pull my hand away right away, because something in his voice made it impossible, like if I moved too fast, everything would shatter into something I could not fix. I swallowed hard, trying to keep my breathing steady. "It was my mother's," I said, finally forcing the words out. "She gave it to me when I was a kid." That was true, at least part of it. His grip did not tighten, but it did not loosen either. His eyes stayed locked on mine, searching, measuring, like he was trying to decide if I was lying or if I was something worse. The room felt colder with every second that passed. "Your mother," he repeated slowly, like the word meant more to him than it should. "What is her name?" My chest tightened. "Mom had warned me about questions like this, about names, about the past. She told me to keep things simple, to stay small, invisible." "Maria Carter," I said, watching his reaction carefully. Something flickered across his face so fast I almost missed it. Not anger, not relief, something deeper, something that did not belong in a man like him. "That is not the name I knew," he said quietly. My heart skipped a beat I forced a small, confused shake of my head. That is the only name I have ever known. He studied me for another long second, then finally released my wrist, but the absence of his touch did not bring relief. It only made the space between us feel heavier. "You can go," he said, turning away from me like the conversation was over, but his voice had changed. There was something under it now, something unsettled. I did not move at first. I felt like if I turned my back on him, something would happen, something I could not see coming. "You will begin your duties tomorrow morning at 6, he added, without looking at me. "Do not be late." "Yes, sir," I said quickly, and stepped back, my pulse still racing. I turned toward the door, my fingers brushing against the necklace instinctively, like I needed to make sure it was still there. I reached the hallway before I let myself breathe again, but even then the air felt different, like the house had shifted around me, like it knew something I did not. The woman from before was waiting for me exactly where I had left her, her expression unreadable. "Did you meet him?" she asked. I nodded, unable to hide the tension in my shoulders. "Good," she said simply, then handed me a key. "This is your room, second floor, east wing. Do not wander." I hesitated, then asked the question that had been building in my chest since the moment he said those words about my mother. What did he mean when he said he knew her? She did not answer right away, her eyes flicking briefly toward the closed doors behind me, like she was measuring the risk of even speaking about it. Then she looked back at me, her voice lower than before. "You are here to work, nothing else. Remember that, Emily Carter?" I nodded, even though her words did not feel like guidance. They felt like a warning. I made my way upstairs, the hallway stretching longer than it should have, each step echoing softly against the polished floor until I reached my room. It was simple compared to the rest of the house, but still larger than any space I had ever called my own. A bed, a dresser, a window overlooking the dark grounds outside. I closed the door behind me and leaned against it, my body finally giving into the tension I had been holding since I arrived. My hands trembled slightly as I reached up and touched the necklace again. The silver felt warm against my skin, grounding me, reminding me of my mother's voice the night she gave it to me. "Never take this off, Emily, no matter what happens. If anyone asks you about it, you say nothing. You understand?" I had laughed back, then thinking she was being dramatic, thinking it was just an old piece of jewelry with no real meaning. But tonight, everything felt different. Tonight, a man who controlled an entire house with a single glance had looked at it like it was the answer to a question he had been asking for years. I crossed the room slowly and sat on the edge of the bed, my mind racing through every detail, every word, every look. The way he said she was supposed to be dead, the way he did not recognize the name I gave him, the way something in his expression had shifted when I mentioned my mother. It did not make sense unless there was something about her, something she had never told me. A soft sound outside my door made me freeze, my breath caught as I listened, footsteps passing by, then fading into silence. I exhaled slowly, but the unease did not leave. It settled deeper, curling into something heavier, something I could not ignore anymore. I was not just here to replace her. I was here because of her, because of whatever she had left behind in this house, in his memory. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the dark expanse of the property. The rain finally beginning to slow. The lights along the driveway flickered slightly in the distance, and for a brief moment, I thought I saw a movement near the edge of the trees, like someone watching, like someone waiting. I blinked, and it was gone, but the feeling remained. I wrapped my arms around myself, trying to steady my thoughts, but one question kept rising above the rest, louder, clearer, more dangerous than anything else. What if my mother did not just work here? What if she had been something else entirely? And what if he already knew it? I woke up before the alarm even had a chance to go off, like my body already knew this was not a place where you slept too deeply. The room was still dark, the faint gray of early morning barely touching the edges of the curtains, and for a second I forgot where I was until I felt it again, that quiet pressure in the air, like the house was always watching. I sat up slowly, my fingers instinctively finding the necklace resting against my skin. It was still there, it always was. I exhaled softly, then forced myself to stand, moving through the routine my mother had drilled into me years ago. Stay quiet, stay efficient, do not draw attention. I tied my hair back in a simple knot, changed into the uniform laid out for me, and checked the time, 5:42 a.m. Close enough. I stepped into the hallway and immediately felt it again, that silence. Too controlled, too perfect, like even the air knew where it was supposed to be. I made my way downstairs, following the instructions from the folder, memorized word for word. Kitchen first, then the east wing, then the study. Everything had a place, everything had a rule. The kitchen was already awake, When I arrived, two staff members moving quietly, their motions precise like they had done this 1,000 times. They glanced at me briefly, then went back to work. No questions, no introductions, just acceptance that I was now part of this machine. Good, you are on time, one of them said, without looking up. Coffee services at 6 sharp. Do not be late. I nodded quickly and moved to follow the instructions, my hands steady. Even if my thoughts were not, I focused on the small things, the weight of the tray, the sound of porcelain against wood, the smell of fresh coffee, grounding me in something normal, even if nothing else about this place was. By the time the clock on the wall hit exactly 6, I was already standing outside the study door, the tray balanced carefully in my hands. I hesitated just for a second, my heart picking up speed, then knocked softly. Come in, the same voice from last night, low, controlled. I pushed the door open and stepped inside, keeping my eyes down at first like I had been told, but I could feel him before I fully saw him, that same presence filling the room. He was seated behind a large desk, papers spread out in front of him, but his attention shifted the moment I entered. I crossed the room slowly, placing the tray down exactly where it was supposed to go, careful not to make a sound too loud, too noticeable. That will be all, he said, but I did not move, not right away, because something felt off, something in the way he was looking at me again, like he was trying to solve something that did not make sense. I kept my gaze lowered, but I could feel it, his eyes on me, tracing every detail. You follow instructions well, he said after a moment. Thank you, sir, I replied quietly. My voice sounded steadier than I felt. There was a pause, then the faint sound of a chair moving. I looked up before I could stop myself and saw him standing closer, now much closer than before. He should not have been able to cross the room that quickly, but somehow he had. You said your mother gave you that necklace, he said, not asking, confirming. Yes, sir, I answered, my fingers tightening slightly around the edge of my sleeve. How long have you had it? Since I was a child. He studied me again, that same intense focus that made it hard to breathe. And she never told you where it came from? The question landed heavier than it should have. I hesitated just for a fraction of a second before shaking my head. No, sir. Something shifted. Again, not in the room, not in him, but in the space between us, like a line had been drawn or crossed. I could not tell which. You may go, he said finally, his tone returning to something more neutral, but not entirely the same. I nodded quickly and turned to leave, but just as I reached the door, his voice stopped me. Emily. I froze, my hand still on the handle. Yes, sir, I said, without turning. If anyone asks you about your mother, you tell them nothing. His words were calm, but there was something underneath them, something that felt like a warning or maybe protection. I could not tell which. I swallowed hard. Yes, sir. I opened the door and stepped out into the hallway, my heart racing again, but for a different reason. Now, not just fear, something else, something that felt like I was being pulled into something I did not understand. Yet I moved through the rest of my tasks on autopilot, my mind replaying every word, every look, every pause, trying to piece together something that made sense, but nothing did. By mid-morning, the house felt busier, voices low, footsteps more frequent, but still controlled, still careful, like everything here existed under rules no one had explained to me. Yet I was cleaning the east wing when I heard it, two voices just around the corner, low enough that they probably thought no one else would hear. She is not supposed to be here, one of them said. I stopped instantly, my breath catching. She looks just like her, the other replied, a note of tension in their voice. That is exactly the problem. Silence followed, then the first voice again. What if he already knows? Another pause, longer this time, heavier. If he does, everything changes. I stood there frozen, my heart pounding so loud I was sure they would hear it. I backed away slowly, my movements careful until I was out of sight, then turned and walked faster than I should have, back toward the main hall. My hands were shaking again, my thoughts racing in a way I could not control anymore. They were not talking about just anyone, they were talking about me. And for the first time since I arrived, I realized something that made my chest tighten in a way I could not ignore. I was not just replacing my mother, I was stepping into something she had left unfinished, something that people in this house were afraid of. And worst of all, I had a feeling Adrian Romano was the only one who knew exactly what it was. The rest of the day passed too quietly, like the house was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen, and I could not shake the feeling that somehow I was the reason why. Every step I took, every room I entered, I felt eyes on me, even when no one was there, even when the hallways were empty, and the only sound was my own footsteps echoing back at me. I kept my head down, focused on my work, just like my mother had taught me, but my mind would not stay still. It kept circling back to those voices, to the way they said she looks just like her, not similar, not reminds them exactly like her. I had seen pictures of my mother when she was younger, soft smiles, warm eyes, nothing about her had ever felt dangerous. and yet here in this house her name felt like something people avoided, like it carried weight they did not want to touch. I was in the main hallway polishing the long wooden table when I felt it again, that shift in the air, the subtle change that meant he was near. I did not hear his footsteps, but I knew. I straightened instinctively, my hands stilling as I lifted my head just enough to see him approaching from the far end of the hall. Adrian Romano moved differently than anyone else in this house, not louder, not faster, just with a certainty that made everything around him feel smaller. He stopped a few feet away from me, his gaze dropping briefly to the table, then back to me. "You missed a spot," he said calmly. I blinked, caught off guard, then looked down quickly and saw it, a faint streak I had not noticed. I reached for the cloth immediately. "I am sorry, sir. I will fix it now." He watched me as I worked, his silence heavier than any words could have been. After a moment, he spoke again. "You are careful, but you are distracted." My hands paused just for a second before continuing. "I am still learning, sir. That is not what I asked," he said softly. I felt my chest tighten. I forced myself to finish wiping the surface before looking up at him. "I am focused on my work." He studied me for a long moment, then stepped closer, not enough to invade my space, but enough that I could feel the shift again, that pull I did not understand yet. "People in this house talk," he said quietly. "They think I do not notice, but I do." I held his gaze, unsure how to respond, unsure if this was a warning or something else entirely. "If you have something to say, say it now." The words caught in my throat because there were too many questions, and none of them felt safe to ask. "Why did you say my mother was supposed to be dead?" I said finally, my voice lower than before, steadier than I felt. His expression did not change, but something behind his eyes did, something sharper. "You should not be asking that question." "Then maybe you should not have said it." The words came out before I could stop them, and for a split second the air between us tightened, like I had crossed a line I could not uncross. His gaze hardened, not in anger, but in something more controlled, more dangerous. "You are not as quiet as you pretend to be, Emily Carter." I swallowed, but did not look away. "You told me not to let anyone ask about her." "I am asking you." A long silence followed, one that stretched just enough to make my pulse quicken, but not enough to break whatever tension had formed between us. Then he exhaled slowly and turned his head slightly, as if considering something far beyond this moment. "Your mother worked here a long time ago," he said. Finally, his voice was calm, but there was something underneath. It's something that did not belong to the present. "She left without explanation. She disappeared." The words sent a chill down my spine. "That is not what she told me." He looked back at me then, and for the first time since I met him, there was something almost human in his expression, not softness, but something closer to recognition. "What did she tell you?" "That she quit, that she never wanted to come back, that this place was not safe for us." The last part slipped out without thinking, and I saw it immediately. The way his posture shifted, the way his attention sharpened, like I had just confirmed something he had been waiting for. "Not safe," he repeated quietly. I hesitated, but nodded. "Yes, sir." Another silence, this one heavier than before. Then he stepped back, creating distance again, as if whatever had just passed between us needed space. "You should listen to her," he said finally. "If she told you to stay away, then you should not be here." My chest tightened at that. "Because I replaced her," I said. "Because she could not come back, because something happened that she would not explain." His gaze held mine steady, unblinking. "And yet you came anyway." I did not answer, because there was no answer that would make sense, not to him, not even to me. I had come because I thought it was just a job, because I thought I understood what I was stepping into, but now I was not sure of anything anymore. He turned away then, like the conversation was over, but his voice stopped me again. "Before I could move, if anyone else asks you about her," he said, "you say nothing, not because you were told to, but because you understand what silence protects." I stood there frozen, his words settling into something heavier than before, not just a rule, not just a warning, something closer to truth. And as he walked away, leaving me alone in the hallway with my thoughts spinning faster than I could control, I realized something that made my grip tighten around the cloth in my hand. My mother had not just left this place, she had escaped it, and somehow, without meaning to, I had just walked right back. And I did not sleep well that night, not because the room was uncomfortable, but because my mind refused to quiet down. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw his expression again, the way it shifted when I mentioned my mother, the way he said disappeared, like it meant something more than just leaving. By the time morning came, I felt like I had not rested at all, just existed in a loop of thoughts that would not settle. I moved through my routine slower than before, more aware of everything, the sound of the floor beneath my feet, the distant hum of voices, the way doors seemed to open and close without warning. This place was not just controlled, it was observant, and somehow that made everything feel heavier. I kept my head down as I worked, But I noticed things now, things I had not seen yesterday, small glances exchanged between staff members, conversations that stopped when I entered rooms, the way some of them avoided looking at me altogether, like I was not just new, but something else, something they did not understand or did not want to acknowledge. By mid-morning, I was assigned to clean the west wing, a part of the house I had not been in yet. The hallway there was quieter, darker, the windows covered by heavy curtains that let in almost no light. It felt different from the rest of the house, less polished, more private. I moved carefully, following the same routine, but my attention kept drifting to the details, the framed photos along the wall, landscapes, mostly nothing personal, until I reached the end of the hall, where one frame stood slightly apart from the others I should have kept walking. I knew that, but something pulled me closer. The photo was older, the edges slightly worn, like it had been moved or handled more than the others. I leaned in just enough to see it clearly, and my breath caught. It was her. Or at least I thought it was. The woman in the photo stood beside a younger version of Adrian Romano, her expression softer than I had ever seen on anyone in this house, her hand resting lightly against his arm, like she belonged there, like she was not just someone passing through. My heart started to race as I looked closer. The features, the eyes, the shape of her face, it was not exactly the same, but it was close too. Close. My fingers lifted slightly without thinking, like I was about to touch the glass, but I stopped myself just in time. "You should not be in this part of the house." The voice behind me made me jump. I turned quickly, my pulse spiking, to find one of the senior staff members standing a few feet away, her expression unreadable. "I am sorry," I said quickly. "I was assigned to clean this wing, not this section," she replied, her tone calm but firm. "You need to go back." I nodded, immediately stepping away from the photo, but my eyes lingered on it for one more second, just enough to confirm what I thought I saw. The resemblance was not a coincidence. It could not be. I walked back down the hall faster than before, my thoughts racing in a way I could not control anymore. That was my mother, or someone who looked exactly like her. But how could that be? She told me she had never come back here, that she left and never looked back. So why was there a photo of her in this house with him? The rest of the day blurred together, my hands moving through tasks automatically, while my mind stayed fixed on that image. On the way he said she was supposed to be dead, on the way people whispered when they thought I could not hear. I was finishing in the kitchen when I felt it again, that shift in the air, and this time I did not need to look up to know he was there. "You went to the West Wing," he said, his voice calm but precise. I turned slowly, meeting his gaze. "Yes, sir, I was assigned there." His eyes held mine, searching, not angry, not surprised, just aware. "You went further than you were supposed to." I hesitated, then nodded. "Yes, sir, there was no point in lying, not here, not to him." "What did you see?" he asked. The question was simple, but it carried weight. I swallowed, forcing myself to stay steady. "A photograph," I said quietly. His expression did not change, but something behind his eyes did. "What kind of photograph?" "He pressed one with you in it," I answered. "And someone else." A long silence followed, heavier than anything before then. He stepped closer, just enough that I could feel that same pull again, that same tension that made it hard to breathe. "Describe her," he said. My throat felt tight, but I forced the words out. "She looked like me, not exactly, but close enough that anyone would notice." I watched him carefully, waiting for a reaction, but he gave nothing away, not at first. Then slowly, almost imperceptibly, his jaw tightened. "You should not have seen that," he said quietly. The words sent a chill through me. "Why is she there?" I asked before I could stop myself. "If my mother never came back, why is there a picture of her in this house?" His gaze snapped to mine, then sharper than before, colder, but not with anger, with something else, something closer to truth. "You are asking the wrong question," he said. "Then what is the right one?" I whispered. He held my gaze for a long second before answering. "The right question is why your mother lied to you." And in that moment, everything shifted again, because I realized something I had been avoiding since the moment I stepped through those gates. Maybe I was not here to replace her. Maybe I was here because of something she never wanted me to find. The question stayed with me long after he left, not just the words, but the way he said them, like he was not trying to confuse me, but trying to push me towards something I had not been ready to see. I moved through the rest of the afternoon in a haze, my hands working automatically, while my thoughts replayed everything over and over. Why did my mother lie? The idea felt wrong, almost impossible, because she had always been careful, always protective, but never dishonest. Not like that, not about something this big, unless she had a reason, unless the truth was something she thought I could not handle, or something she was trying to keep me away from. I finished my last task later than usual, taking longer than I needed, just to avoid going back to my room too soon, because I knew the moment I was alone, the silence would make everything louder. When I finally stepped into the hallway leading to my room, the house felt different again, quieter, but not in a peaceful way, more like it was settling into something deeper, something more watchful. I closed the door behind me and leaned against it for a second, my eyes closing as I tried to steady my breathing, but it did not work. My thoughts would not slow down. I crossed the room and sat on the edge of the bed, reaching up to hold the necklace between my fingers, turning it slightly so the faint engraving on the back caught the light. I had never paid attention to it before, never thought it mattered, but now every detail felt important, like a piece of something I was only just starting to see. I stood up, suddenly unable to sit still any longer, and moved to my bag, pulling out my phone. My fingers hovered over my mother's number for a second before I pressed call. The line rang once, twice, three times, then went to voicemail. I tried again, immediately same result. A familiar unease settled in my chest, not panic, not yet, but something close enough to make it hard to ignore. I lowered the phone slowly, staring at the screen like it might change if I waited long enough. She always answered, always. I tried one more time, and when it went to voicemail again, I felt it, that shift inside me, that quiet realization that something was not right. I set the phone down on the dresser and turned back toward the room, my gaze drifting to the window outside. The sky had darkened earlier than expected, the clouds heavy again, like another storm was coming. The air felt thick, pressing against the glass like it was trying to get in. A soft knock at my door made me freeze. My heart jumped before I could stop it. Come in, I said, forcing my voice to stay steady. The door opened slowly, and the woman from before stepped inside, her expression more serious than I had seen it. Yet you need to come with me, she said quietly. I frowned, slightly confused. Did something happen? She did not answer right away, just looked at me in a way that made my stomach tighten. You should bring your necklace, she added. My fingers instinctively closed around it. Why? Her gaze did not waver. Because he asked for you. The words sent a ripple of tension through me, but I nodded anyway, moving toward the door, because I knew better than to refuse. Not here, not now. We walked through the house in silence, her pace quicker than usual, her posture more rigid, like something had changed since earlier. The lights in the hallway seemed dimmer, the shadows longer, as we moved deeper into the house, toward a part one had not been to yet. We stopped in front of a door I had not seen before, smaller than the others, less decorative, but somehow more important. She knocked once, then stepped back. He is inside, she said simply. I hesitated just for a second, my hand hovering near the handle before I pushed the door open. The room inside was darker than the rest of the house, the curtains drawn tight, blocking out any light from outside. A single lamp illuminated the center of the space, where Adrian stood near a table, something small resting in his hand. He did not look at me right away, just kept his gaze on whatever he was holding, like it had all of his attention. Close the door, he said quietly. I did, as he asked, the sound of it clicking shut behind me echoing louder than it should have. He turned then, his eyes finding mine instantly, and for the first time since I met him, there was no distance in his expression, no control, just something raw, something I could not fully read. Yet he stepped closer slowly until he was standing just a few feet away from me, and then he lifted his hand slightly, revealing what he had been holding. My breath caught. It was another necklace, almost identical to mine, the same shape, the same design, but older, the metal slightly worn, like it had been carried for years. Where did you get that? I asked before I could stop myself. He did not answer right away, just watched me closely. Then finally, he spoke, his voice lower than before. I have been looking for its match for a very long time. My pulse quickened as I looked down at my own necklace, then back at his, understanding beginning to form in a way that made my chest tighten. This does not make sense, I whispered. He took one more step closer, closing the space between us just enough that I could see the reflection of the lamp in his eyes. It will, he said quietly, but only if you are ready to hear the truth. And in that moment, I realized something I had not been ready to admit until now. Whatever my mother had been hiding, it was not just about her, it was about me. The truth did not arrive all at once. It pressed in slowly, like the air in that room, heavier with every second, until I realized I was not breathing properly anymore. I forced myself to inhale, steady, to keep my eyes on him, on the necklace in his hand, because if I looked away, I might lose whatever moment this was. You said you have been looking for its match, I whispered, my voice quieter than I intended. What does that mean? His gaze did not waver from mine. It means, he said slowly, that there were always two. My fingers tightened instinctively around the one resting against my chest, like I could protect it from something I did not understand. Yet my mother never told me that. I said. He nodded once, like he already expected that. No, she would not have. I swallowed hard, my thoughts racing. Then why do I have one and you have the other? The silence that followed was different from before, not tense, not uncertain, something more deliberate, like he was choosing exactly how much to reveal and how much to hold back. Because your mother took it, he said finally. The words landed heavier than I expected. Took it from who, I asked. He held my gaze for a long moment before answering from me. My heart skipped a beat. That did not feel normal. That did not feel like something I could just explain. A way that does not make sense, I said, shaking my head slightly. If she took it from you, why would she keep it? Why would she give it to me? He exhaled slowly, like the answer was not simple, like it carried weight that had not faded with time, because it was never meant to be separated in the first place. My chest tightened as I looked down at the necklace again, then back at his. So what is it? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. His expression shifted again, not softer, but something close to it, something that felt less controlled. It was a promise. He said the word hung in the air between us, unfamiliar and heavy. A promise. Between who? I pressed. Between two people who believed they could leave this world behind. He said quietly. My breath caught the image from the hallway, the photograph, the way my mother stood beside him. It all came rushing back at once. And suddenly the pieces did not feel random anymore. They felt connected in a way that made my chest tighten. You were talking about her, I said slowly. My mother. His gaze did not move. Yes, the word was simple, but it carried more than anything he had said so far. My pulse quickened, and I took a small step back, not out of fear, but because the space between us felt too small for everything that was happening. You said she disappeared, I said, my voice steadier now. But you are telling me she was here with you, that she had this with you. That is not the same thing. No, it is not, he agreed. Then tell me what happened, I said, the words coming out sharper than before, because I could not stand the half answers anymore, not when everything about this felt like it was about to change. He was quiet again, not avoiding the question, but weighing it like it mattered how it was said. She left, he said finally, and not the way you think, not suddenly, not without reason. She left because she believed it was the only way to protect something. My heart pounded harder. Protect what? He looked at me, then really looked at me in a way he had not before, like he was not just seeing me, but seeing something through me, something that had been there all along. You, I felt the ground shift under me, not physically, but enough that I had to steady myself with a breath that did not come easily. That does not make sense, I whispered again, but this time the words felt weaker, like I was trying to hold on to something that was already slipping. She left before I was even old enough to remember anything about this place. How could she have been protecting me from something I did not even know existed? Because you were never supposed to know, he said quietly. The room fell into silence again, but this time it felt different. Not heavy, not suffocating, something else, something that felt like a line had been crossed. And there was no going back. I shook my head slightly, trying to piece everything together, but the more I tried, the less it made sense. If she wanted me to stay away, why would she send me here? Why would she let me come back to the one place she was trying to keep me from? That is the question you should be asking, he said, not unkindly, but not softly either. I stared at him, my thoughts spinning faster than I could control. She would not do that, I said quietly. She would not send me here if it was dangerous, if it was something she was trying to protect me from. Unless she did not send you, he replied. The words hit harder than anything else he had said, and for a second I could not respond, could not even think, because if she did not send me, then why was I here? Why now? Why this place? I felt my grip tighten around the necklace again, my pulse loud in my ears. Then something clicked, something small, but sharp enough to cut through the confusion. The calls, I said suddenly. I tried to call her tonight. She did not answer, not once. His expression shifted just slightly, enough that I noticed that is not like her. I continued, my voice quieter, now more uncertain. She always answers. He did not say anything, but he did not need to, because the silence said enough. The realization settled slowly, but once it did not move. My mother did not send me here, I said, my voice barely steady. Then why am I here? I looked at him, then really looked at him the same way he had looked at me before, and for the first time I saw it, not just control, not just authority, something else, something that had been there from the beginning, waiting for me to catch up. You did not find me by accident, I said quietly, and this time he did not deny it. The silence after my words did not feel empty. It felt confirmed, like something that had been unspoken was finally allowed to exist between us. I did not look away from him this time. I could not, because if I did, I might lose whatever truth was standing right in front of me. You knew I was coming, I said quietly, not a question. His gaze stayed steady on mine. Yes, the answer came, without hesitation, without apology, and somehow that made it heavier. My chest tightened. You found me. How? His jaw shifted slightly, not defensive, not avoiding, just choosing how much to give. You were not hard to find. He said your mother made sure of that. My heart skipped again. What does that mean? I pressed. It means he continued, that she never disappeared the way people here believed. She erased herself from this world, but not completely, not enough for someone who knew where to look. My fingers tightened around the necklace. You were looking for her, I said, and you found me instead. Another pause, but shorter this time, because we were past the point of pretending. He nodded. Once I found what she left behind. The words settled slowly, but when they did, they hit harder than anything else I had heard. You were talking about me, I said. My voice did not shake this time. It sharpened. He did not correct me. Yes, my breath caught, and for a moment I forgot how to respond, because nothing about this felt like something I could step back from anymore. Why now? I asked finally. If you have been looking for her for years, why now? Why bring me here? His eyes held mine, not cold, not distant, something else, something more deliberate. Because she wanted me to find you. The words did not make sense at first, not fully. I shook my head slowly. No, she would not do that. She told me to stay away. She warned me about this place. She would not send me here. He took a step closer, not enough to overwhelm me, but enough that I felt it again, that pull, that tension that had been building since the moment we met. She did not send you here directly, he said, but she made sure that when the time came you would have no choice but to return. My thoughts raced, trying to keep up with what he was saying, no, trying to catch what he was not saying. How could she control something like that? I whispered. He did not answer immediately, and that silence told me more than his words would have. She knew something, I said slowly, something that would make me come here, even if I did not want to. His gaze did not move. Yes, my chest tightened again, but this time it was not fear. It was something else, something closer to realization. The job, I said. My mother getting sick, the sudden need for someone to replace her. It was not random. He watched me carefully as I put the pieces together. No, it was not. I exhaled slowly, my mind spinning, but clearer now than it had been before she planned this. I said, not as a question, not anymore. She knew I would come here. Eventually he did not deny it, and that was enough. The room felt smaller again, not because of him, but because of what this meant, because of what I was starting to understand. My mother did not just leave this place. She set something in motion, something that led directly back to it. Why? I asked again, this time softer, because the question felt different now, not desperate, not confused, but something deeper. He looked at me for a long moment, and when he spoke his voice was lower than before. Because there are things she could not finish, and things only you can understand. My pulse quickened. What does that mean? I pressed. It means, he said carefully, that your mother was not just a maid. Emily Carter. The words landed with a quiet weight that echoed louder than anything else in the room. I felt my breath catch again, but I did not look away from him. I could not just a maid, I repeated. He shook his head once. No. The silence that followed stretched just long enough to let the meaning settle, not fully, not completely, but enough that I knew whatever came next would change everything. Then what was she? I asked, my voice steady, but my chest tight. His gaze did not soften, but it shifted again into something I had not seen before, something that felt closer to memory than control. She was the only person in this house who ever made me believe I could leave it. The words were not what I expected, not an explanation, not a role, something else, something that felt more personal, more complicated than anything I had prepared for. And then he added quietly, she was also the only one who knew how to destroy everything. I built. My heart stopped for a second, then started again faster than before, because now the question was not just about her anymore. It was about me, about why I was here, about what she left behind. And as I stood there in that room with him looking at me like I was the answer to something he had been searching for, I realized something that made my grip tighten around the necklace in a way I could not control. Whatever my mother had been part of, whatever she had started, it was not over, and somehow I was standing right in the middle of it. The words stayed with me long after he said them, not just what they meant, but what they implied about everything I thought I understood about my life, about my mother, about why I was standing here in a place that suddenly felt less like a house and more like a secret I had been walking toward. Without knowing, I swallowed slowly, trying to keep my voice steady. You said she could destroy everything you built, I said. Does that mean she tried? His gaze did not waver, but something behind it shifted, not regret, not anger, something more complicated. She did not try, he said quietly. She chose not to. That answer hit differently, because it carried something unexpected, not conflict, but restraint, like whatever had existed between them had not ended in destruction, but in a decision. My chest tightened. Why would she leave then? I asked. If she had that kind of power, why walk away from it? Why disappear? His jaw tightened slightly, and for a moment I thought he would not answer, but then he did, because staying would have cost her something she was not willing to lose. The words felt heavier than they sounded, like there was more underneath them, something he was not saying directly, something about me. I realized slowly. My fingers curled slightly against my palm. She left Because of me, I said. He did not respond right away, but he did not deny it either, and that was enough. The truth settled in my chest, not sharp, not sudden, but deep, like it had been waiting for me to catch up. You said she wanted you to find me. I continued, my voice quieter now. Why would she do that if she was trying to protect me from this place? His gaze softened just slightly, not weakness, not vulnerability, but something closer to understanding. Because protection does not last forever, he said, and neither do secrets. The room fell quiet again, but this time it felt different, not heavy, not tense, something clearer, like we had stepped past the confusion into something more direct. Then tell me what she left behind, I said, because it is not just this necklace, is it? His eyes flicked briefly to the chain at my throat, then back to my face. No, it is not. My pulse quickened. What else? His expression shifted again, more focused, now more deliberate, like he had decided something new. He said simply. The word landed in a way I could not ignore. I shook my head slightly. That is not an answer. It is the only one that matters, he replied calmly. My chest tightened. Then explain it to me, I said, because I am standing here and nothing makes sense. I am not part of whatever this is. I am just her daughter. His gaze held mine steady, and for the first time, there was no distance at all, no control, no barrier, just certainty. You are exactly what she left behind, he said, and you are exactly what she was trying to protect. The words echoed in my head, but they did not settle. Not yet. Protect me from what? I asked quietly. His eyes did not leave mine. From becoming what she was. My breath caught, and for a moment I could not respond, because something about the way he said it did not sound like a warning. It sounded like a possibility. I shook my head slowly. No, that is not possible. I am not like her. You do not know what she was like, he said softly, and neither do you. The truth of that hit harder than anything else, because it was not something I could argue, not anymore, not after everything I had seen, everything I had heard, the photograph, the necklace, the way people reacted when they thought I was not paying attention. My entire life, I had believed I understood who my mother was, what she had been, what she left behind. But standing here now, I realized how little I actually knew. Then tell me, I said, my voice steadier than before. Tell me who she really was. His gaze shifted slightly, not away from me, but deeper, like he was looking through time instead of at me. She was someone who understood this world better than anyone I had ever met, he said, someone who could see patterns before they happened, who could make decisions that changed everything without ever raising her voice. My pulse quickened as I listened, trying to hold on to every word. She was not part of this house, he continued. She was the reason it stayed standing. The statement settled slowly, but when it did, it changed everything, because that meant she had not just been connected to this place, she had shaped it, influenced it in ways I could not even begin to understand. Then why leave? I asked again. Because she saw what it would become, he said, and she refused to let it take you with it. The words lingered between us, heavy and clear and impossible to ignore. I felt my grip tighten around the necklace. Again, my thoughts racing, but sharper now, more focused. So she left to protect me, I said, but she also made sure I would come back. His gaze held mine steady. Yes, the contradiction twisted in my chest, because it did not feel like protection, it felt like preparation. Why? I asked one more time, because that was the only question left. Why bring me back here at all? His expression did not change, but something in his eyes did, something that made my breath catch before he even spoke. Because there are things in this house that were never meant for anyone else, and now, he said quietly, they are waiting for you. The words settled in a way that made it impossible to look away, impossible to pretend this was just a job or just a coincidence. And as I stood there in that dim room with the weight of everything pressing in around me, I realized something that changed everything. I was not here by accident. I was here because something had been left unfinished, and whether I wanted it or not, it had already begun. The words did not leave me. They settled somewhere deeper, like a weight I could not set down even if I wanted to. And now they are waiting for you, I repeated quietly, not because I did not hear him, but because I needed to understand what that actually meant. What is waiting for me? His gaze did not shift, but there was something in it now, something more resolved, like whatever he had been holding back was no longer necessary. Answers, he said simply. The word should have brought relief, but it did not. It only made my chest tighten more, because answers meant truth, and truth meant everything I thought I knew was about to change. I shook my head slightly. That is not enough. I need more than that. I need to know what I am walking into. His jaw moved subtly, not frustration, not impatience, just acknowledgement. You are already in it, he said quietly. The statement landed heavier than anything else, because it was not something I could argue, not anymore, not after everything I had seen, everything I had heard, the house, the staff, the way my mother's name lingered like something unfinished. I exhaled slowly, trying to steady myself. Then tell me where to start, I said. His gaze shifted briefly past me toward the door, then back to my face like he was making a decision. And he turned slightly and gestured toward the far side of the room. Follow me. The words were simple, but they carried weight. I hesitated only for a second before stepping forward, because at this point there was no turning back. Not really. He moved toward a section of the wall that looked no different from the rest at first glance, just dark wood polished to the same perfect finish as everything else in this house. But when he reached it, his hand pressed lightly against a panel, and something shifted. A quiet click, then a seam appeared where there had been none before. My breath caught as the wall opened slowly, revealing a narrow passage behind it, dimly lit, and nothing like the rest of the house. This is not part of the house, I said quietly. He glanced back at me. Once no, it is not. I stepped closer, my pulse quickening as I looked into the passage. It felt older somehow, less controlled, less designed, like it had existed long before everything else around it. What is this? I asked. A place your mother knew well, he replied. My heart skipped again. I looked at him, then back at the passage, then back at him, trying to process what that meant. She was here, I said, not as a question, not just here. He corrected. She built part of this. My breath caught again, and this time I could not hide it, because the idea did not fit with anything I had believed about her. She was not an architect. She was not someone who designed hidden spaces in a house like this. She was just my mother. That is not possible, I whispered. He did not argue with me, did not try to convince me. He simply stepped aside, giving me a clear view of the passage. Then you should see it for yourself, he said. The air inside felt different, cooler, quieter, like it held something the rest of the house did not. I took a slow breath, then stepped forward, crossing the threshold before I could second-guess myself. The moment I did, the light shifted behind me, the door closing softly, sealing us inside. The passage stretched ahead, narrow but not cramped, the walls lined with shelves and compartments that looked more functional than decorative. My footsteps sounded louder here, echoing slightly with each step I took. What is all of this? I asked, my voice lower, without meaning to. Information, he said simply. Records, plans, things your mother left behind. My heart started to race again, but this time it was not fear. It was something else, something sharper, something closer to realization. You said she could see patterns, I said quietly. He nodded. Once she saw what was coming, long before anyone else did. I moved closer to one of the shelves, my fingers hovering over the edge of a folder before I pulled it out slowly. The paper inside felt heavier than it should have. As I opened it, my eyes scanning the contents, numbers, diagrams, notes written in a handwriting I recognized instantly. My breath caught. It was hers. My chest tightened as I flipped through the pages, each one more detailed than the last, each one connected to something I did not fully understand yet, but could feel was important. She was planning something, I said slowly, not looking up. Yes, he replied. What kind of plan? I pressed. His voice remained calm, but there was something underneath it now, something that felt more serious than before. A contingency. My fingers stilled on the page. A contingency for what? He stepped closer, not enough to invade my space, but enough that I could feel the shift again, that presence that had followed me since the moment I arrived. For when everything falls apart, he said quietly. The words settled into something heavy, something real, something that made it impossible to ignore what this place, what this moment actually meant. I looked down at the pages again, then back at him, my pulse loud in my ears. You think that is going to happen? I said. He did not hesitate. Yes, the certainty in his voice sent a chill through me, but it also did something else. It made everything clearer. Because if he was right, then this was not just about the past, not just about what my mother had been or what she had left behind. This was about something that had not happened, yet something that was still coming. I swallowed hard, my grip tightening on the folder. Then why me? I asked. Why am I the one who needs to see this? His gaze held mine steady. Because she trusted you to understand it. And in that moment, as I stood there surrounded by pieces of a plan I did not fully understand yet, but knew I could not ignore, I realized something that made everything shift again. This was never about finding answers. This was about becoming part of them. The pages did not feel like paper in my hands. They felt like something alive, like every line, every note carried intention that had not faded with time. I stood there staring at the handwriting, recognizing it instantly, and yet not understanding it at all, because this was not the woman who packed my lunches or reminded me to bring a jacket. This was someone else, someone precise, someone who saw things I had never even thought to look for. I turned another page, my eyes scanning faster now, diagrams layered over maps, notes written in margins, connections drawn between places, names, dates that meant nothing to me, and everything at the same time. She planned all of this, I said quietly, not looking at him. Not just planned, he replied. She prepared. My chest tightened as I kept reading, trying to make sense of it, but every answer only led to more questions. What does It mean when everything falls apart? I asked, my voice steadier now, not because I felt calm, but because I could feel something shifting inside me, something focusing. He did not answer immediately, and that pause told me this mattered more than anything else we had talked about so far. It means, he said finally, that the balance she helped create no longer holds. I frowned slightly, glancing back at him. What balance? His gaze did not move from me, the one that kept this place from becoming what it could have been. I looked down at the pages again, my mind racing through everything I had seen since I arrived. The control, the silence, the way people moved like they were following rules that were never spoken. She was controlling something, I said slowly. Not controlling, he corrected. Understanding. There is a difference. I swallowed, trying to process that, because if she understood it well enough to maintain it, then losing her meant something had changed, something had already started to shift. And you think that is happening now? I asked. His answer came without hesitation. Yes. The certainty in his voice sent a quiet ripple through me. Not fear, not panic, something sharper, something that felt like awareness. Then why has nothing changed? I pressed. This house still runs the same. Everything still feels controlled. His gaze sharpened slightly. Because you are only seeing the surface. My grip tightened on the folder as I flipped to another page, this one different from the others. Less structured, more personal. My breath caught as I recognized the handwriting immediately, but this time it was not diagrams or notes. It was a message. My fingers trembled slightly as I traced the words. Emily, if you are reading this, then I was right. You came back. The air around me shifted like the room itself had gone quieter. I did not realize I was holding my breath until it started to hurt. I forced myself to keep reading. You will not understand everything right away. That is not the point. The point is that you are here, and that means you are ready. My chest tightened, ready for what I whispered, but there was no answer on the page, only more words written in the same careful script. I try to keep you away from this for as long as I could. Not because you are weak, but because you are not. You see things, Emily, you always have. You notice what others ignore. That is why you are the only one who can finish this. My heart started to race louder now, the words hitting deeper with every line. Finish what I said quietly, my voice barely steady, but I kept reading anyway. There are things in this house that were never meant to be controlled, only guided. I did what I could, but I ran out of time. You will know what to do when you see it. Trust yourself, even when it feels impossible. My vision blurred slightly, and I blinked hard, trying to focus on the last line, because somehow I already knew it mattered most. And do not trust him completely. The words stopped me completely. My breath caught as I stared at them, my mind trying to process what I was reading, what it meant, what it implied. I lowered the page slowly, my fingers tightening around the edges. Before I looked up at him, he was already watching me, his expression unreadable. Did you know about this? I asked, my voice quieter now, but sharper. He did not answer right away, and that silence told me enough. You did, I said, more certain this time. Yes, he replied simply. My chest tightened. Then why did you not tell me? Because you needed to see it yourself, he said, and because she wanted you to question everything, even me. The words echoed in my head, but they did not settle. Not yet. I looked back down at the page, then back at him, my thoughts racing in a way that felt different now, not confused, not lost, something clearer, something more focused. She does not trust you, I said quietly. His gaze did not shift. That depends on how you define trust. My grip tightened again. She told me not to trust you completely, I pressed. And yet here you are showing me all of this. He stepped closer, not enough to overwhelm, but enough that I felt it again, that pull, that presence that made everything sharper. Because she also trusted me to bring you here, he said. The contradiction hit immediately, sharp and undeniable. So which is it? I asked. Does she trust you or not? He held my gaze steady, his voice calm, but carrying something deeper. Both. The answer should have confused me more, but it did not. It made something click, something that had been building since the moment I arrived. This was not simple. It was never meant to be simple. I looked back down at the page one more time, then closed the folder slowly, my pulse steady now, not because everything made sense, but because I understood one thing clearly. Whatever my mother started, she did not leave it unfinished by accident. She left it for me, and whether I trusted him or not, whether I understood it or not, I was already part of it. The word both did not confuse me the way it should have. It clarified something deeper, something I had been circling since the moment I stepped into this house. This was not about choosing sides. It was about understanding why both could exist at the same time. I exhaled slowly, setting the folder back onto the shelf, but my fingers lingered on it like letting go meant losing something I had just started to grasp. She wanted me to question you, I said quietly, but she still trusted you to bring me here. His gaze did not shift. Yes, that means she knew something about you. I continued. Something I do not. I looked up at him, then really looked at him not as the man who controlled this house, not as the one who had been watching me since I arrived, but as someone who had been part of my mother's past in a way I was only beginning to understand. What are you not telling me? His expression remained composed, but there was something under it now, something less guarded than before. I am telling you everything you need to know right now, he said. The answer should have frustrated me, but it did not. Instead, it confirmed what I was starting to see. This was not about giving me all the answers at once. It was about letting me reach them myself. She wrote that I would understand when I saw it, I said, my voice steadier, now more certain. He nodded once. Then what am I supposed to see? I asked. His eyes held mine for a long moment before he answered, not what is written, but what is missing. The words settled slowly, but when they did, something shifted again, not around me, but inside me. I turned back to the shelves, my eyes scanning the rows of folders, the notes, the diagrams, the patterns my mother had left behind. If she planned for something, if she prepared for something, then there had to be a gap, something she did not write, something she expected me to find. I moved further down the narrow passage, my fingers brushing lightly against the edges of the shelves until I noticed it, a space. Not large, not obvious, but there a section where the pattern of folders broke, where something should have been, but was not. My pulse quickened as I stepped closer. You said she prepared for when everything falls apart, I said slowly. But if she wrote all of this, then why leave something out? He did not answer immediately, and that silence told me I was getting closer. Because some things cannot be written, he said finally. They have to be understood. My hand hovered over the empty space, my mind racing through everything I had seen, everything I had read. The way she wrote, the way she thought. She was not just leaving instructions, she was leaving something else, something that required interpretation, something that depended on me. I closed my eyes for a second, letting everything settle. The house, the whispers, the photograph, the necklace, his words, her words, they all connected, not perfectly, not yet, but enough that I could feel the shape of something forming. I opened my eyes again and looked at the shelves differently, this time not as information, but as a system, a pattern. She did not leave something out by accident, I said quietly. She removed it. His gaze sharpened slightly. Yes, the confirmation sent a quiet rush through me, not fear, not doubt, something closer to clarity. Then it is not missing, I continued. It is hidden. A small pause, then a single nod. Yes. I stepped back slightly, my eyes moving across the space again, more carefully, now not just looking, but analyzing the way she would have the shelves were organized too precisely. For randomness, everything aligned, everything balanced except for that one section, which meant it was not just empty, it was intentional. She wanted me to find it. I whispered, more to myself than to him, because if she trusted me to understand, then she knew I would see the difference. My fingers moved along the edge of the shelf, tracing the line where the gap interrupted the pattern, then continuing past it, searching for something that did not belong, something subtle. Something shifted under my touch, a slight difference in the wood, not visible, but there. I pressed lightly and felt it give just enough to confirm what I already knew. There, I said softly. My pulse quickened as I pushed further, and the panel moved. A small hidden compartment sliding open with a quiet sound. Inside was a single object, nothing more, no stacks of paper, no complex diagrams, just one item resting in the center, waiting. My breath caught as I reached in slowly, my fingers closing around it. It was a key, not large, not ornate, simple, but heavy with meaning. I turned it slightly in my hand, the metal cool against my skin, then looked up at him. She did not leave instructions, I said quietly. She left access. His gaze held mine, something shifting there, not surprise, not confusion. Something closer to recognition. Yes, the word came softer this time. I looked back at the key, my mind racing again, but clearer now, sharper. This is not about understanding what she wrote, I said. It is about finding what she did not. My grip tightened slightly around the key as the realization settled fully into place. She did not want me to follow her path. She wanted me to open something new, and as I stood there in that hidden space holding the one thing she had chosen to leave behind, I understood something that changed everything. This was not the end of her plan. It was the beginning of mine. The key felt heavier the longer I held it, not because of its size, but because of what it represented. Not an answer, not even a solution, but a direction. I did not look away from it right away, because I knew the moment I did, everything would move forward, and there would be no way to step back. This opened something, I said quietly, not asking. His gaze remained on me. Yes, my fingers tightened slightly around the metal where I pressed. He did not answer immediately, and that silence told me everything I needed to know. It was not a place I could understand just by being told. It was something I had to find. Then I will need to know where to use it, I said, my voice steady, now not hesitant, not uncertain. He studied me for a long moment, and for the first time since I met him, there was something different in his expression, not control, not distance, something closer to approval, or maybe recognition. Then he turned without another word and moved back toward the entrance of the passage. "Follow me," he said quietly. I did not hesitate this time. I stepped after him, the key still in my hand, my pulse steady but aware of every movement, every shift in the air as we walked back through the narrow corridor. The moment we stepped out into the main room, the wall closed behind us seamlessly, as if it had never opened at all. The house felt different now, not unfamiliar, but changed, like I was seeing it for what it actually was instead of what it pretended to be. He did not stop there. He continued through the room and into the hallway, his pace measured but direct. I followed without question, because something inside me had already shifted, something that no longer needed permission or explanation. We moved through the house in silence, passing rooms I had cleaned, hallways I had walked through, but everything felt sharper, now more intentional, like I could see the structure beneath it all, not just the surface. We stopped in front of a door I had passed twice before without thinking anything of it. It looked ordinary compared to everything else in this place. No carvings, no heavy design, just a plain dark surface. "That is where it starts," he said. My eyes moved from the door to the key in my hand, then back to him. "You knew about this," I said. He nodded. "Once I knew it existed, I did not know what had opened. That was for you." My grip tightened slightly. As I stepped closer to the door, my heart was not racing anymore. It was steady, focused, like it understood this moment mattered more than anything before. I reached out slowly, my fingers brushing against the handle first, then moving down to the lock. It looked simple, too simple for something that had been hidden this carefully, but I knew better than to underestimate anything in this house. I raised the key, hesitating for just a fraction of a second, not out of fear, but because I understood what this meant. This was not just about opening a door. This was about stepping into whatever my mother had left unfinished. I turned the key. The sound was quiet, almost too soft to notice, but I felt it more than I heard it. The shift, the click, the release. I pushed the door open slowly. The room inside was not what I expected. It was not grand, not filled with information, not lined with secrets. It was empty, or at least it looked that way at first glance. My breath slowed as I stepped inside, my eyes scanning the space, the walls bare, the air still. Then I saw it, a single desk in the center of the room, and on it a file, nothing else, just that one object placed perfectly like it had been waiting. I moved closer, my steps measured, my attention fixed on the file. Like everything else had disappeared. I reached out slowly, my fingers brushing against the cover before I opened it. Inside was one page. Only one. My breath caught as I read the first line. "Emily, if you are here, then you already understand what this place is, not what it looks like, but what it does." I swallowed hard, my eyes moving across the words faster now, because I could feel it, the shift, the moment everything came together. This house is not just a structure, it is a system. It survives because it adapts, and it adapts because it is guided. The people here believe they are in control. They are not. The silence in the room deepened, but I barely noticed because the words pulled me forward, demanded my attention. I was never meant to stay here. I was meant to shape it until the right moment came. That moment is now. My pulse quickened, but not from fear, from something else, something that felt like alignment. If you are reading this, then you are not here by accident. You are here because you can see what others cannot, and that is the only thing that has ever mattered. I exhaled slowly, my grip tightening slightly on the edge of the desk. As the final line came into focus, "You do not need to become me. You need to become what I could not." My vision blurred for a second, and I blinked hard, forcing myself to steady my breathing before I lowered the page slightly. My mind was not racing anymore. It was clear, not overwhelmed, not uncertain, focused. I looked up slowly, my gaze moving back toward the door, where he stood watching me, not speaking, not interrupting, just there waiting. "You knew it would be like this," I said quietly. He did not deny it. No, the word was simple, but it carried weight. I looked back at the page one more time, then closed the file carefully, setting it back exactly where it had been. My hand moved instinctively to the necklace resting against my chest, then back to the key still in my other hand. Everything my mother had left behind, everything she had hidden, everything she had prepared, it all led to this moment. Not answers, not closure, a choice. I turned back toward him, my expression steady, my voice calm, but certain. "This is not about finishing what she started," I said. "It is about deciding what happens next." His gaze held mine, something shifting there, something that felt like acknowledgement, like he had been waiting for this exact moment. "Yes," he said quietly. I took a slow breath, then stepped